Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Now normally on the show I show you how to build a fun and inexpensive focused commander deck. But after many requests from a lot of viewers, I decided to take today's show in a different direction. So today we're going to have our very first episode on budget commander staples. So in episodes like this one, I'm going to take you through 10 different cards that fit into the same role. So just a quick note before we get started, these rankings are going to be subjective and they're all very deck dependent. This means that while I might rank a card to be the best overall out of these, it might not be the best in a certain deck. It also means that there are some cards that won't make the top 10 for this list. But just because they didn't make this list doesn't mean that they're not an amazing card in the right deck. And as always with the Commander's Quarters, we have a budget restriction on these cards. So every single one of these cards has to be $1 or less on their own. Alright, but before we get started, make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you can stay up to date on the latest Commander's Quarters videos. So on today's budget commander staples, we're going to be going through the top 10 mana rocks. The first mana rock on our list coming in at number 10 is Prismatic Lens. Prismatic Lens costs 2 and taps for a colorless, and it also has pay 1 to tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. With a lot of my decks, I like to prioritize getting things out quickly. Because of this, I like to have a lot of my mana rocks come out on turn 2. Not only does Prismatic Lens come out early, but it can tap for mana right away. And on top of that, it helps us fix our mana when we need it. It's a very flexible mana rock and it can fit into a wide variety of decks. And at just 8 cents, it's a great value for your budget. Next up, coming in at the 9 slot is Commander Sphere. Commander Sphere costs 3 and it can tap to add 1 mana of any color in our Commander's color identity. On top of that, we can also sacrifice it at any time to draw a card. Now this card used to be a little pricier, but thanks to some recent reprints, it's gone down to about 69 cents now. That means it's going to be a little easier to justify including it even in a budget deck. Now at 3 mana, I require a mana rock to do a couple of things for me. The mana rock's either going to have to tap for 1 mana of any color or more than 1 mana total. On top of that, I need some additional value from the mana rock. Commander Sphere is great in this regard since we can sacrifice it at any time for no cost to draw a card. So early in the game it can help us fix our mana by providing us 1 mana of any color. And then later in the game we can sacrifice it to replace itself by helping us draw a card. Again, this is a fantastic mana rock, but there's a reason that it's number 9 in my list. Since it costs 3 and can only tap for 1 mana, there are other mana rocks that are a lot quicker than this one. One of those mana rocks is Sphere of the Suns, which comes in at number 8. Sphere of the Suns costs 2 and enters the battlefield tapped with 3 charge counters on it. We can tap it to remove a charge counter from it in order to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Now Sphere of the Suns checks off a couple of boxes for us. It only costs 2 so we can get it out really early to help us ramp quickly. Also, it helps us fix our mana by tapping to add 1 mana of any color. But there is a large downside to this card, we can only do it 3 times. Now there are some decks where we can add more counters onto it, but that's not going to be the vast majority of decks that we play. Still, this card helps us ramp and fix very early, so it's a great addition to a lot of budget decks. And at only 10 cents, it can pretty much go into any budget. Then at number 7, we've got Star Compass. Star Compass costs 2, enters the battlefield tapped, it can tap to add to our mana pool 1 mana of any color that a basic land we control could produce. Now in some circumstances this card is going to be better than something like Sphere of the Suns, and in other circumstances it's going to be worse. If we have the right basic lands in play, this card overperforms for us. But if we don't, we can be stuck without our colors. In my opinion, what makes this card better than something like Sphere of the Suns is that there's no limit to the number of times that we can use it. And as long as we have other cards in our deck that help us make sure that we get the basic lands that we need, this card does great. Being another card that only comes in at 10 cents, it's easy to include it in any budget deck that needs it. Next up, coming in at number 6 is Hedron Archive. Hedron Archive costs 4 and taps to add 2 colorless to our mana pool, and we can pay 2 to tap and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. So first off, the rate on Hedron Archive is right where we want to be. In general, my rule is that I like to have a mana rock produce at least half the mana I put into it. So if I pay 2 into a mana rock, I expect it to tap for 1, and if I pay 4 into a mana rock, I expect it to at least tap for 2. So not only does Hedron Archive provide us good value by being able to tap for 2, but it also provides us some utility for later. If at some point we get stuck and we need to draw some cards, we can just pay 2 to tap and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. This is a huge value and it can really help us out when we're in a pinch. Thanks to some recent reprints, this card has thankfully gone down in price and is only 35 cents now. This means that it can fit into a lot of budget decks without having to make space for it. Then we've got Everflowing Chalice coming in at number 5. Everflowing Chalice costs 0 but has multi-kicker 2. It's going to enter the battlefield with a charge counter for each time that we kick it. And then it can tap to add colorless for each charge counter that's on it. In my opinion, this is the most flexible budget mana rock that we have at our disposal. If we need mana early, we can pay 2 to just kick it once and then it can tap to add 1 colorless. Or if we have other sources of ramp in our hand, we can just hold it back to cast it later. And if we draw it late game, it provides us even more value by being able to tap for more mana. And sometimes we even just want to cast this card for free like in our Joyrah deck. In my opinion, this mana rock should be worth much more than 49 cents and is a great include in a lot of decks. Next up in the 4 slot is Worn Power Stone. Worn Power Stone costs 3, enters the battlefield tapped, it can tap for 2 colorless. Remember how I said that we want to get at least half of our mana back from our mana rocks? Well, this breaks that rule. Only costing 3 and being able to tap for 2 is huge when it comes to ramping us. This card comes in huge, especially in monocolor decks like Nezahal that need to ramp quickly. The only downside is that it doesn't help us fix our mana. And because of that, and it doesn't have any additional value other than ramping us, it's going to be at our 4 slot. But at 31 cents, this card is an absolute steal. Coming in at number 3, there's Mindstone. Mindstone costs 2, can tap for a colorless, and we can pay 1 to tap and sacrifice it to draw a card. This card checks a lot of boxes for us. It comes down early on turn 2, it can tap right away, and we can get some additional value out of it. So not only is it going to help us ramp early, but it's also going to help us later in the game when we get stuck. By paying just 1, we can tap and sacrifice to draw that card to replace it. And while it doesn't help us fix our mana, it can fit into a wide variety of decks because of that second ability. Luckily for us, this card has been reprinted a lot in recent years and is only 26 cents now. Next up, coming in at second place, we've got the Diamond Cycle. Marble, Sky, Charcoal, Fire, and Moss Diamond each come into play tapped and tap for 1 color. So not only do these mana rocks come down early, but they also help us fix. They also don't have a restriction like something like Star Compass does. So no matter what happens, they'll always be able to tap for that 1 mana of their color. Now their prices do vary quite a bit between which diamond they are. Marble, Charcoal, and Moss Diamond are each very affordable for the majority of budget decks. But Sky Diamond and Fire Diamond are both a little more expensive and might be harder to fit into your deck. Another thing to consider with these diamonds is other ramp options. Moss Diamond is not very useful for the majority of green decks since green has a lot of other sources of better ramp. Whereas something like Sky Diamond can be very useful as a source of ramp for blue decks. But now it's time to go into our number 1 mana rock for this budget staples list. And at number 1 is going to be the Signet Cycle. Each guild has a signet of its own that costs 2, and you can pay 1 into it at tap to add the colors of that guild. So for the Dimir Signet, you can pay 1 to tap and add blue-black to your mana pool. Not only do these mana rocks come down early, but you can use them right away. On top of that, they're great at helping us fix our mana. In my opinion, they do pretty much every single thing that we want a mana rock to do. And that's why they've earned the number 1 rank in this list. Now like the Diamond Cycle, the Signets vary wildly in price. The Simic Signet will only cost you 18 cents, but the Azorius Signet will set you back 89 cents. So again, depending on the budget of your deck, it can be either easy or a little harder to fit one of these in. However, for those color pairings that don't really have access to other sources of ramp, these cards are great to add to your deck. And that's going to wrap up our show today, but I really want to hear about what you guys think about these budget staples, so why don't you let me know in the comments below. When you're buying budget staples like these, make sure you're doing so on tcgplayer.com because not only do they have great prices, but they also sponsor this show. So by supporting them, you're helping support the Commander's Quarters. The link for all of these budget staples can be found in the description below. Also, make sure you're following the Commander's Quarters on Twitter and Facebook. Links can be found in the description below. By following us, you'll get early hints on who the next commander just might be for the next deck tech. Also in the description below, you find a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron of the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get a personalized deck tech dedicated to you. If you like this episode, make sure you like it and subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out some of our deck techs on the channel as well. Alright, that's all from me today. Thanks again and have a good one.